They really thought that Hitler was doing the country good. You know, they never. Well, I guess they didn't realize initially what was going on in the concentration camps, but I guess when they found out it was too late anyway, because the war was well advanced. And there again, look at them. You can put a straight edge on them. Their troops are so, they were fine. And there again, look at the crowds there. I ran into a real problem. I wanted to get overseas, and of course I was instructing in an armament school at the time. That was a small place there, and they didn't want me to leave because I was the instructor, and they didn't have an instructor. So I went to the commanding officer and told him that I wanted to get overseas, and they blocked me off. They said, "Well, you'll lose your rank." I said, "Okay." I said, "I don't care if I lose my rank. It doesn't bother me." I said, "I want to get overseas because I said I feel that I'm not doing what I want to do here." Now, the Ile-de-France was one of the fastest ships on the oceans at that time then, and the German wolf pack couldn't catch up to her because she was so fast. But they did. They chased us down into the Bay of Biscay. And after we got out of there, then we sailed right into England. We never had a problem. The Battle of Breton was going on at that time, and we were in a place called Christchurch. It was down near Dover. And I'll always recall there, when we arrived there, of course, the German Air Force they were prominent. We still hadn't caught up, and they were just coming in at will and strafing and all that sort of thing. But the people there, you know, they were, I can't say enough about them. I remember sitting in a little place down at Christchurch in a park, and there's an old couple sitting there on the fence, and the air raid sirens were going. And I said, "Do you mind me saying something?" They said, "No." I said, "Don't you think you should be in an air raid shelter?" And they said, "No, we're just going to watch the activities going on." So this is the way they kind of felt. They were so used to it. And it's a funny thing, you know, you adapt to almost anything, and you get used to it, and you just carry on doing what you're doing. And this was so prominent over there that I could see. Our unit used to move sometimes 3 times a day. We'd have to move to make sure that the Germans didn't find out where we were located. And this is what we did. We were completely mobile, and we could go in there and we could move within an hour. Complete, and you wouldn't know we were ever there. The arrangements would be made, dispatchers would be sent out ahead, and away we go. We'd map out a spot and find it, get in there and stay. And then if you had to get out there 7 or 8 hours. See, some of the places, shortly after Normandy, there were some dry spells. And when you'd move, you'd raise a lot of dust. So we had to be very careful that we didn't do that. And so we had what they called a water bowser. We used to spray that place with water to make sure it wouldn't raise no smoke or no dust. Because if it did, the Messerschmitt was a giveaway for the German Air Force. So we did most of our moving by night. And just a little slit in the light in the front of the vehicle. But we had a dispatch rider that would go ahead of us. But we were with the Air Stores Park, and we were trained to go over there and be prepared to provide all the services necessary to keep the fighter planes going, especially Spitfires and Typhoons. Now, the Typhoon type of plane was one that carried rockets. The reason they wanted to get them out, they knew that the Germans had superior tanks. And having superior tanks, our Sherman tanks were slower. They just couldn't compete with the German tanks. Our purpose there was, when the forces advanced towards Caen, there was an airport called Carpiquet Airport. Now that airport was still intact, and the idea was that we would be there to support the Typhoon type aircraft and the Spitfire aircraft, because they wouldn't have to carry drop tanks with gasoline. They'd be closer to the front. And they could knock out the German tanks with these Typhoon rocket aircraft. And that's the only way they could benefit. And they knew they had to do that because the Germans were hard to move. And they were there for about maybe, I forget now, a month and a half or two, before they broke through and got through Caen, and they went through a place called Villiers-Bocage. I'll always remember that. And of course, in Villiers-Bocage, the only thing left in that whole city, it was a city of around 25,000 people. The only thing that was left was one chimney standing. The rest was just rubble. Going through Villiers-Bocage, the thing that came most to me was I saw a woman there with her children. She had two children in a little cart with four wheels on it, and it was raining and half snow, miserable day. And she was I could see she was trying to get some bricks to get a place to get in so she could get some protection, you know. And that stuck in my mind all during the war, and I couldn't think of anything, you know, but that. And I said to myself, you know, we were there. We had our mess tins with food. We maybe didn't have the best of circumstances, but she had nothing. And she had her children to look after, and her husband was probably gone, you know, and there was no hope. And I thought, my God, you know, we were so lucky that we had what we did have. And of course, the people in Holland were really starving. And the thing that got me was, this day I looked out, and we had our garbage tins there. And I saw these two children there, they were maybe 11 to 12, beautiful children, and they're digging in the garbage. It almost broke my heart when I saw it. So I said to Kachaba, we got to do something here. And it was hard to do anything because you couldn't get anything to and I said, well, we have one thing. I said, cigarettes. We have lots of cigarettes. And cigarettes on the black market were worth 50 cents each. Now, the Red Cross would send the cigarettes in. And if you had a pack of cigarettes, that was worth a lot. I said, well, what we'll do is, and we had our Christmas chocolate. This was just at Christmas time. So went out the next day and gave the kids the chocolate. Now, we weren't supposed to fraternize. That was against the rules. It was taboo. And you could get in real serious trouble, you know, in some cases. So anyway, we said, the heck with the fraternization, we'd go out and do it. So we went out and gave them the chocolates. And they came back the next day, and we asked them if they enjoyed their chocolate. Well, the little girl said, we didn't have any chocolates. We took them home to our mother. And I said, well, what about your father? We don't know where he is. The Germans took him. I can always remember them telling me that, and I felt so sorry for them. The commanding officer got wind of what we were doing with the cigarettes and that. Called us up on that. And we went in before him, and Kerchaber said, you go in, Dutchie. I said, no. I said, okay. I said, we have to go in. I said, whether we like it or not, the commanding officer wants to. So we went in, and he gave us a blast. He said, now, have you got anything else to say? And I said, yes, sir. I said, we have. I said, what would you do? He said, I guess I'd do the same thing. Now get the hell out of here. Anyway, so we did. That was the end of that story. But I can still see them in their wooden shoes out sweeping the sidewalks and all the rest. And everything was a mess around them, you know, from the war. But anyway, after they arrived in Antwerp, it was a bad 2 weeks. Never had a sunny day, which meant that our aircraft were tied up. They couldn't fly. They couldn't do anything. The weather was terrible. So anyway, we were stuck there, but we were okay. We were kind of protected on one side. And this is where I got these pictures. Actually, I saw a trailer there. And I didn't know what it was. Anyway, there's a friend of mine, and I said to him, I'm going to see what's in there. I looked in. It was a photographic unit. So I reached in and I grabbed a bunch of negative. I just stuck them in my battle dress pocket. Never thought any more of them and kept them. Sun broke through a couple of days after New Year's, and of course the Allied aircraft were waiting, and they just pounced on the Germans and drove them back. And that's where, as far as we're concerned, the war almost ended. You know, you're getting into the end of January, and the Germans were retreating all over the place. we had the officers we had in our unit were excellent, and they understood everything. And we were all as one. Everybody knew what everybody was doing, and but you just adapt to all that. You adapt to it. I remember the 1,000 bombers going overhead. You know, when before they bombed in Caen and those places, and the sky was just black. And then, of course, when the Americans come in with their Liberator bombers and the B-25s, B-26s, all of these different types of aircraft, the sky was full of them. And no matter where you look, you see dogfights going along, you know, in the sky. But you adapted to it. You're so busy that I never really gave it a thought, to be honest with you. I'm not kind of one of the lucky ones. The Germans, at that time, you've got to give them credit. They were wonderful soldiers. The German army were well trained, and they almost conquered the world with a place the size of Nova Scotia. Just think about it, you know. And but they did it, and of course the Americans come in, and thank God they did. And of course the Russians were on the eastern end, and they were coming the other way. Thank God they were. This will save their skins, you know. You know, I'm totally against war, and anything anybody can do that will indicate to the people that war is not necessary, then I think we should make our position quite clear. You know, first war they said, never again. Then you had the Second World War. Then again they said, never again, lest we forget. But it still happened. So I guess if you keep pounding the message, someday the politicians and the people that make these decisions will realize just exactly what they're putting some of these people through. I do think that we have to start in the schools. You have to start because, you know, children have to realize how dangerous war can be. Sure, war produces heroes and all of these things, but war is not all about heroes. It's about the devastation it does to our planet and to the people itself.